It is October 29th, 2004. America is 4 days away from one of the most consequential presidential elections in its history. George W. Bush and John Kerry have spent months locked in a bitter campaign, and at the center of nearly every debate, every speech, every attack ad is one question, one wound that has never stopped bleeding since a Tuesday morning 3 years ago. What happened on September 11th, and where is the man responsible? Then, without warning, he appears. On televisions across the country, on every major news network, a face fills the screen. A long beard, calm eyes, a microphone, and behind him, nothing but a blank wall, as if he is broadcasting from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. Al Jazeera has just published a new tape, and on it, Osama bin Laden, alive, composed, almost theatrical, is directly claiming responsibility for the September 11th attacks more boldly than he has ever done before. He is not hiding, he is performing. He is addressing the American people as though he is their equal, as though he has earned the right to speak directly to the nation he attacked, the nation that has spent 3 years, 2 wars, and hundreds of billions of dollars trying to find him. And he is smiling. For millions of Americans watching at home, the feeling is impossible to describe. It is not just fear, it is something worse than fear. It is the slow, suffocating realization that somewhere on this earth, this man is sitting in a room, comfortable enough to set up a camera, write a script, and deliver a monologue without the slightest concern that anyone is close to finding him. He feels safe. At CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, the television is also on, and in a special unit whose only job, whose entire reason for existing is to locate and capture Osama bin Laden, the mood is not panic. It is something quieter and in many ways darker. It is exhaustion. Because the agents in that room know something the American public does not. They know that at this moment they have almost nothing. The leads are cold, the trails have gone silent, the informants have dried up. 3 years of intelligence work, 3 years of interrogations, 3 years of satellite images and drone surveillance and covert operations across 2 countries, and the most wanted man on the planet just looked into a camera and waved at them. How did it come to this? To answer that, we have to go back to the mountains of Afghanistan, back to a battle that America believed it had already won, back to the single catastrophic moment when they had Osama bin Laden cornered and let him walk straight through their hands. This is the story of the most expensive manhunt in human history, and it starts with a mistake that would cost America nearly a decade and $3 trillion to correct. December 2001. America is angry. America is unified. And for the first time in a generation, America is absolutely certain about one thing. They know exactly where Osama bin Laden is. The United States invasion of Afghanistan has been swift and overwhelming. Within weeks, the Taliban regime has collapsed, Al-Qaeda fighters have been scattered, and the entire terror network that plotted the September 11th attacks has been pushed into a single desperate corner, the towering frozen mountains of eastern Afghanistan, a remote stretch of jagged caves and impossible terrain known as Tora Bora. And somewhere inside those caves, intelligence agencies are almost certain, is Osama bin Laden himself. The operation that followed seemed on paper like it could not fail. American air power rained down on the mountains with terrifying precision. Hundreds of airstrikes shook the caves from above. On the ground, local Afghan tribal militias, backed and funded by American forces, pushed through the brutal terrain on foot, fighting their way toward Al-Qaeda's last stronghold, meter by meter. For a brief electric moment, it felt like it was over. The world's most wanted man was cornered. He had nowhere left to run. The mountains ended. The border with Pakistan was being watched. All America had to do was close the trap. But the trap was never fully closed. Rather than flooding the mountains with American boots on the ground, the operation relied heavily on those local Afghan militias to do the fighting. And those militias, underpaid, loosely organized, and operating in terrain they understood far better than any American commander, were not tightly controlled as Washington believed. Gaps existed, paths were unwatched, and in the chaos of battle, in the freezing darkness of a Tuesday morning in the Afghan mountains, Osama bin Laden walked through one of those gaps. By the time the Battle of Tora Bora was officially won, the cave complex had been captured, Al-Qaeda had been defeated in the mountains, a total of around 20 people had been arrested, but bin Laden was not among them. The CIA was left standing in the rubble, empty-handed, staring at a victory that felt like the most expensive defeat in American history. What should have been the final chapter of the hunt had instead become the opening paragraph. The trail, so hot just days before, had gone completely cold. Years later, senior military commanders and intelligence officials would look back at Tora Bora as the single greatest missed opportunity of the entire war on terror. A Senate Foreign Relations Committee report would conclude that bin Laden had been within reach and that the decision not to deploy sufficient American forces had allowed him to escape. But in the winter of 2001, no one wanted to say that out loud, because now the real hunt had to begin, and nobody yet understood how long or how brutal that hunt was going to be. Among the roughly 20 people arrested at Tora Bora, there was one man who at first glance seemed entirely unremarkable. He gave no dramatic confession. He offered no valuable intelligence. He simply sat across from his interrogators, calm and cooperative, and told them the same story over and over. His name was Mohammed al-Qahtani, and he claimed he had traveled to Afghanistan for one reason and one reason only: falconry. The investigators almost moved on, but before they did, someone ran his fingerprints, a routine procedure, the kind of thing that gets done 100 times a day in the machinery of a massive intelligence operation. Most of the time, it produces nothing: a name, a blank file, a dead end.
This time, it produced something that made the room go very still. The fingerprints matched a record already sitting inside an American database, and the record told a story that had nothing to do with falconry. Just weeks before the September 11th attacks, Mohammed al-Qahtani had attempted to enter the United States. He had arrived at Orlando International Airport carrying $2,800 in cash and a one-way ticket, two details that immediately alarmed the customs agent on duty, who turned him away at the border, suspecting he was attempting to illegally immigrate. At the time, it had seemed like a routine decision, a minor incident, a name logged and forgotten. But now, with the smoking ruins of the World Trade Center still fresh in the American memory, that routine decision took on an entirely different weight. Because investigators also knew something else. On the exact same day that Qahtani was turned away at Orlando Airport, a phone call was placed from inside that airport to a known Al-Qaeda telephone number in the United Arab Emirates, a number that had already been under surveillance. The timing was too precise to be a coincidence. FBI agents buried themselves in mountains of airport surveillance footage, chasing the thread, and eventually, frame by frame, camera by camera, they found what they were looking for. A car parked and waiting at the airport that day. A car rented by a man named Mohammed Atta. Mohammed Atta, the ringleader of the September 11th attacks, the man who piloted American Airlines Flight 11 directly into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. He had been there that day, waiting to pick Qahtani up, and the conclusion investigators drew was chilling. Mohammed al-Qahtani had almost certainly been intended as one of the hijackers aboard United Airlines Flight 93, the flight that crashed into a Pennsylvania field when its passengers fought back. A customs agent's instinct had unknowingly saved lives. But more importantly for the CIA, Qahtani now became a doorway. Through careful interrogation, he and a growing number of other al-Qaeda captives began revealing the inner architecture of the organization, its layers, its structure, the way information moved from the bottom all the way to the top. And somewhere in that structure, invisible, unnamed, operating entirely in the shadows, was a courier. A single man who carried bin Laden's words to the world and carried the world's words back to bin Laden. The CIA didn't know his face, they didn't know his real name, they barely knew he existed, but they were about to spend the next several years of their lives trying to find him. By 2002, the CIA had built a clearer picture of al-Qaeda than ever before. They understood its layers. At the bottom, foot soldiers, recruits trained in camps across Afghanistan, willing to die for a cause. Above them, a command and planning structure, operational masterminds like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who designed the attacks and moved the pieces. And at the very top, untouched and unreachable, sat one man, Osama bin Laden. The problem was that understanding the structure of an organization and actually locating its leader were two entirely different things, and bin Laden, it became increasingly clear, had done something extraordinarily difficult in the modern world. He had made himself invisible. No phone calls, no emails, no satellite communications that the NSA could intercept, no meetings with anyone's location could be tracked, no contact with family members that intelligence agencies could monitor. In a world drowning in digital footprints, where almost every human being on Earth leaves a trail of data simply by existing, Osama bin Laden had erased himself completely. He was a ghost, and ghosts do not make mistakes. But the CIA knew one thing with absolute certainty: bin Laden was still communicating. New audio tapes continued to surface. Messages were clearly reaching al-Qaeda's senior leadership. He was not operating in total silence. He simply was not using any channel that modern surveillance could detect, which meant he was using something ancient, something low-tech, something that no satellite or signal interception program in the world could touch. He was using people. Human couriers, trusted men who moved on foot, by car, by bus, carrying handwritten messages, memorized instructions, and sealed letters between bin Laden and the outside world. No digital trail, no phone records, nothing that could be hacked, intercepted, or traced. The CIA's entire strategy shifted. If they could not find bin Laden directly, they would find the invisible network that connected him to the world, and then they would follow that network, patiently, methodically, for however long it took, all the way to his door. Then, in mid-January 2004, Kurdish security forces arrested a man named Hassan Gul. He was carrying a letter addressed directly to bin Laden. When American interrogators sat down with Gul, he gave them something that cracked the investigation wide open. He told them that bin Laden's personal courier, the single most trusted man in the entire network, the one human being on Earth with direct access to the world's most wanted man, was someone who had already appeared once, briefly, on the CIA's radar. His name was Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti. It was just a name, an alias at that, one that translated loosely to the father of Ahmed from Kuwait. No photograph, no real name, no confirmed identity, just a name floating in the dark. But for the CIA, after years of dead ends and empty caves, a single name felt like the first real crack of light in an impossibly dark room. The CIA finally had a name: Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti, bin Laden's personal courier, the one human being on Earth who moved freely between the world's most wanted man and the outside world. After years of silence, dead ends, and empty caves, this name felt like the first real crack of light in an impossibly dark room. But intelligence work is never that clean, and what came next was not a breakthrough, it was a wall of lies. As investigators began pressing their al-Qaeda captives about Kuwaiti, something strange and deeply telling started to happen. Nobody could agree on anything. Every prisoner told a different story, and the stories contradicted each other in ways that felt too deliberate to be coincidental. Hassan Gul,
The courier, caught carrying a letter addressed directly to bin Laden, had been clear and specific. Kuwaiti was a significant figure. He was personally familiar with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, al-Qaeda's operational mastermind, and with Mohammed's successor, Abu Faraj al-Libi. He was not a minor player. He was central.
Then the CIA sat down with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed himself, and Mohammed told them the exact opposite. Kuwaiti, he said, was nobody, a low-level operative who had long since retired and walked away from al-Qaeda entirely. He was inactive, irrelevant, not worth the CIA's time or attention. 1 year later, Abu Faraj al-Libi, the very man Gul said Kuwaiti was closely connected to, was arrested in Pakistan, and al-Libi told investigators the same dismissive story. Kuwaiti? Retired, inactive, forget about him. The CIA paused, because in the world of intelligence, when two of the most senior figures inside a terrorist organization both go out of their way to tell you the same specific lie about the same specific person, that is not a coincidence. That is a signal. That is two men who had been trained to protect a secret, both reaching for the exact same cover story, and in doing so, illuminating precisely what they are trying so desperately to hide. The denials weren't burying Kuwaiti's importance, they were confirming it. But here the story takes a turn that is impossible to tell without confronting something deeply uncomfortable, because the methods being used to extract this information were not the kind that appear in courtroom dramas or procedural thrillers. Many of these prisoners were subjected to what the CIA called enhanced interrogation techniques, a clinical phrase that covered deeply abusive treatment, including waterboarding. And in 2014, a Senate Intelligence Committee report examining these interrogations reached a conclusion that was as damning as it was clear. The torture had not worked. It had not produced reliable information. It had not brought investigators meaningfully closer to bin Laden. Years of suffering, years of legal and moral compromise, and the investigation was no further forward than before. The CIA was stuck again, holding a name they could not verify, built on testimony they could not fully trust, searching for a man whose very existence the people who knew him best refused to confirm. But somewhere out there, Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti was still moving, still delivering messages, still breathing. And he had no idea that two of the most powerful men in al-Qaeda had just made him the most interesting person on Earth. The world kept moving. Barack Obama was elected president. The iPhone changed how humanity communicated. Michael Jackson died. The global economy collapsed and slowly rebuilt itself. A decade of history rolled forward. Wars, elections, disasters, triumphs. And through all of it, the CIA's special unit kept working, kept waiting, kept staring at a name on a board that still had no face attached to it. By 2007, a foreign intelligence service, whose identity has never been made public, quietly handed the CIA something they had been unable to find themselves: the true identity of Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti. His real name was Ibrahim Saeed Ahmed, a Pakistani man whose family had relocated to Kuwait, which explained the alias, not Kuwaiti by birth, Kuwaiti by geography. It was progress, but it was the cruelest kind of progress, the kind that shows you exactly how far you still have to go. Because knowing a man's name and knowing where he is are two entirely different things, and Ibrahim Saeed Ahmed had spent years learning how to be nowhere. Then, in June 2010, he made a mistake. It was small, the kind of error that in any ordinary life would mean absolutely nothing. He changed the way he and his brother communicated by cell phone, a shift subtle enough that most people would never even notice it. But the NSA had been watching, intercepting,
cataloging thousands of phone conversations across Pakistan, filtering them through analysts trained to find exactly this kind of pattern. And in the flood of intercepted calls, one voice stood out. The man spoke a distinctive blend of Arabic and Pashto, the language of northwestern Pakistan, and in a conversation with a friend somewhere in the Persian Gulf, he was asked a simple, casual question: "Where are you these days?" He didn't answer directly. He simply said that he was with the same people he had been with before. For a trained intelligence analyst, those 9 words were a confession. The CIA also noticed something else about this man. His phone was switched off almost constantly. He only ever inserted the battery when he was in the area around Peshawar. He was going to extraordinary lengths to avoid being tracked, the behavior not of an ordinary citizen, but someone who had been trained to understand exactly how the NSA operated and was fighting it step by step. This was Kuwaiti. They were almost certain of it. In August 2010, a Pakistani CIA agent on the ground in Peshawar spotted him, in his car, moving through the city, and quietly, carefully, without alerting a single Pakistani official, because the United States had decided to tell Pakistan nothing. They followed him. Through the streets of Peshawar, out of the city, down roads that grew quieter and less familiar, until the car finally stopped in front of a compound. It was large, unusually large, surrounded by high walls topped with barbed wire. No internet connection, no phone lines running in or out. A place deliberately, almost architecturally, designed to be invisible to the outside world. The agents had expected to follow Kuwaiti through weeks of surveillance until he eventually led them to wherever bin Laden was hiding. They had assumed there would be more road to travel. But as they studied the walls of that compound, sitting quietly in a Pakistani military town just 35 miles from the capital of Islamabad, in plain sight of an entire nation, a thought began to form that nobody dared to say out loud quite yet. What if they were already there? May 1st, 2011, Abbottabad, Pakistan, 11 p.m. The night is dark and moonless, chosen deliberately. Every detail of what is about to happen has been rehearsed, wargamed, debated, and approved at the highest levels of the United States government. Months of surveillance, weeks of planning, 9 years, 7 months, and 20 days of hunting. It all comes down to the next 40 minutes. From Jalalabad airfield in eastern Afghanistan, 2 Black Hawk helicopters lift silently into the Afghan sky. They are not ordinary Black Hawks. They have been modified with classified stealth technology, specially designed to muffle their rotor noise and reduce their radar signature to almost zero. The Pakistanis have radar systems watching these skies. The Pakistani military academy, sitting just a few hundred meters from the target compound, has personnel awake and on duty. Nobody has been told America is coming tonight. Not a single Pakistani official, not a single intelligence contact. The United States had made the decision in absolute secrecy because the question of whether elements inside Pakistan's military and intelligence establishment knew where bin Laden was hiding and chose not to say anything was a question too dangerous and too politically explosive to risk answering before the mission was complete. The helicopters crossed the border in silence. In Washington, D.C., inside a small conference room at the White House, President Barack Obama sits alongside his most senior national security advisors. On a screen in front of them, a live video stream from a camera attached to the mission. They are watching in real time, speaking in low voices, barely breathing. The most powerful people in the world, sitting completely still, able to do nothing now but watch. At the compound in Abbottabad, the operation does not go entirely to plan.
One of the helicopters experiences a loss of lift as it descends into the compound's interior, a consequence of the high walls trapping warm air, and comes down hard, its tail clipping the compound wall. It is disabled on impact. In Washington, the room goes rigid, but the SEALs are already moving. These are not men who stop when things go wrong. They train for things going wrong. They move through the compound systematically, floor by floor, room by room, in the dark, with the calm and terrifying precision of people who have prepared for exactly this moment. On the second floor, then the third, and then, in a bedroom, in the dark, on the top floor of a compound in a quiet Pakistani military town, the longest and most expensive manhunt in the history of the United States of America comes to an end. Not with a dramatic battle, not with a dramatic speech or last stand. Quietly, suddenly, in a room that smelled of ordinary life, clothes, books, the faint trace of someone who had been living there for years, hiding from the entire world just by staying still. Osama bin Laden was dead.